Hi, this is Carol Pope.
Hi, I'm Kevin Staples.
And you're listening to Rainbow Country
with Mark Tara.
The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the persons appearing on the program.
Today on Rainbow Country, Queer Voices, with a spotlight on Canadian actor and singer-songwriter Holly Cinnamon, who joins me to talk about her music, her acting, including spending 2 seasons on the hit HBO series Succession. That and more on episode 367, so stay tuned for Gay Talk Radio right here on Rainbow Country.
Hello, my name is Conchita.
And I'm Barbecue.
And my name is Hardcora. And we are the Beat Girls.
You're listening to
Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Well, hello and welcome to a brand new journey through Rainbow Country. As I like to call it, a little gay radio show working to give voice to the LGBT community and beyond. And as always, I am your tour guide through Rainbow Country. I'm producer and host, Mark Tara. By the way, Rainbow Country originates from CIUT FM in Toronto and now proudly in syndication on 12 outlets across Canada, from coast to coast to coast. The Yukon, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the east coast of Canada in Newfoundland, Ontario, even down to Buffalo, New York, and online. Well, thanks to you tuning in, streaming, downloading, but ultimately listening. Together we continue to build Rainbow Country into a nationally syndicated gay radio show, a #1 LGBT podcast on Podomatic.com's Gay and Lesbian chart, as well as being recognized as Canada's #1 LGBT podcast on Feedspot.com. So today, Canadian actor and singer-songwriter Holly Cinnamon joins me in conversation to talk about her music. She also shares her thoughts on the ongoing American actors and writers strike, plus her 2 seasons on the hit HBO series Succession. Plus an hour 2 music from LGBT artists, independent artists, voices that we've come to know and love in classic disco, classic 80s, classic house, and on this episode I'm featuring some classic funk, some queer jazz, and more. All that lies ahead as we start Journey 367 through Rainbow Country, and when I return, Queer Voices with actor and singer-songwriter Holly Cinnamon.
Hi, everybody. This is Gino Vanelli. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
I'm looking for that woman with whom 1 + 1 is 11. Side by side with her hand in mine. She's the one, but so am I. 1 + 1 sometimes makes 2. But 2 can get fused and confused. I need some space between me and you. Could 1 + 1 be 11? That's my idea of heaven.
Holly Cinnamon, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm pretty good. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for being here to have your voice, your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here to talk about all things, let's see, you. To talk about you and you.
I'm happy to be part of the queer community, and that's my community. So it's nice to feel a sense of belonging. So thanks for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. You are an actor of stage and screen. You are a musical artist, a recording artist. But let's start here with yourself. There is, in America, there's a strike going on right now. There's a writer's strike. There's an actor's strike. The SAG, which is the Screen Actors Guild. Are you a member of SAG?
Yep, I'm a member of SAG and of ACTRA in Canada, SAG-AFTRA in America and ACTRA in Canada, and both of the stage unions as well. So I'm kind of a member of everything.
So if you can, so I take it you're on strike right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can you sort of give us, the Coles notes of the main important points that you guys want addressed with this new contract that you will hopefully get soon? Because as we're recording this, you guys are actively on strike. So talk to me about some of the main issues that are outstanding for you guys.
Yeah, of course. It's mid-August right now. So, some people have said the strike will hopefully resolve after Labor Day, but that's also looking pretty hopeful. It might go on until even the beginning of 2024. So I'm knocking on wood that it ends sooner rather than later, because I did book a film that is being delayed in terms of shooting because of that. So basically, since streaming, there's kind of, I think, two main points that need to be resolved. One is the issue around how much streaming services are paying actors and writers and basically everyone who makes the shows. Streaming, they used to have network TV contracts, and that's where the majority of people watch TV. Then streaming came about, and now the majority of people watch TV on streaming versus networks. But SAG has been playing catch up over these years, trying to make contracts. When I first was on a Netflix show, the contract that they had for Netflix, which was in 2018, was the same as though I were on a web series on YouTube, because it was considered new media. So SAG has been, agreement by agreement, slowly trying to catch up to streaming services and protect actors in streaming services. So the main argument that's kind of at the forefront that everyone's talking about right now is about residuals. But there's more things about the pay scale, about even regulations around time on set and what you have to be paid for to do with streaming that haven't been negotiated to the actors' and writers' benefits in the same way that network TV has been negotiated for decades. So they're still catching up on a lot of fronts regarding streaming. And the main thing is just getting paid. I don't know if you've seen the percentages out there. I saw something this morning. I'm not going to quote the exact numbers, but it's less than 1% that of the total revenue that they're fighting for in terms of how much Netflix and Amazon and Disney Plus are making. So I'm on a show that's on Disney Plus, but they're very sporadic. There's no way to track them. So I've gotten everything from over $3,000 on a check to 1 cent. Literally, I got a check for 1 cent once. And I asked SAG, and it doesn't have a way to actually make sure that they're paying me the correct amount. SAG doesn't keep track of that. It's basically the honor system. So that is one of my main concerns. And then the other big topic is AI, which I first started encountering when I was on the set of Hocus Pocus 2, and they did a full body scan with about 1,000 cameras. I went into this little room in my costume, and they scanned my body from all angles, and they had me do different actions because they're CGI. They were potentially going to CGI in a spider that might interact with me. So they needed to have basically a digital version of me that they could do whatever they wanted to as an actor. And this is becoming increasingly popular. It's happening to background. I know some background actors who did the movie Don't Look Up. And at the end of that movie, if you've seen it, there are a bunch of nude people who arrive at this planet with Meryl Streep, and they did full body scans with them in this thing nude. So basically, and some of these contracts, they own the rights to that in perpetuity. They can do what they want with it. So they could take those people's bodies and make them do other things as actors without their consent. So it's pretty scary what they can do with this AI technology and how they can replace actors. It would make us lose work, but also it would make us be doing projects that we didn't necessarily consent to, or use our voices and our images for things that we haven't necessarily agreed upon. So that's the scary part for me.
You were just mentioning earlier that you had booked a job, and hopefully you'll be able to get to that sooner than later. But for yourself, how has the strike affected you?
Basically, I'm out of work. I mean, I'm lucky in the sense that I have 2 other businesses. I teach Alexander Technique and yoga, and I coach actors. So I've been revamping that business like I did during the pandemic. It basically feels like kind of the pandemic in some ways again, but different. You know how a lot of people, if their industry was shut down, they had to shift to another industry. So I started an entire online teaching business during the pandemic, which is called Teaching Presence. So I've been doing a lot of more teaching, and then I'm making an album of my first full-length studio album, which just the timing worked out that I was already planning to be in pre-production and recording it this fall. So luckily I have other projects that aren't acting related, but essentially the way that I make my money is largely doing SAG work. So I'm an out of work actor like the rest of them right now. And unfortunately, the AMPTP has decided that they want to kind of try to starve us out of, us being unable to pay our bills or even afford to pay our rent. And that's their strategy, which seems deliberately cruel considering we're talking about a small percentage of the income they make. I'm pretty sure, and I'm not great at remembering all the exact details, but there were some executives that were being quoted as to their plan to kind of starve us out. And it was reported that they made the same amount in a day. Their income in a day was
like $70,000 a day.
Yeah, which is about the same amount as like a writer would make in a year if they agreed to what the writers are asking for.
Right.
So it's ridiculous.
So that's going on right now, and hopefully that'll get resolved sooner than later. But as I mentioned earlier, you are an actor of stage and screen. You're a musical artist. For yourself, which one came first, acting or music?
Well, it all started when I fell in love with Barbra Streisand when I was 12, and I saw Hello, Dolly, and I just decided that that's what I wanted to do. So I guess what came first was musical theater, but Barbara also is, an actor, singer, director, multifaceted queen. So I really wanted to become like her. So it's kind of all at once. But I didn't start recording and producing my own music until the pandemic.
Right.
I've been an actor. I got a drama degree, and then I went to the National Theatre School, and then I did my master's in musical theater. So I've been performing on stage and screen for the last decade or so. But it really only in the pandemic did I teach myself, kind of like Phineas and Billie Eilish in their bedroom, how to make my own music and release
Thanks
it.
to technology. So. Yeah. Yeah. So you just mentioned releasing a number of singles. 2022 was a big year for you because you released like 5 or 6 songs on your own record label, The Female Gaze. How did you come up with this name for your record label, The Female Gaze?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I So it's female gaze. The word gaze I spell GAYZE. So it's both includes the word gay, and the female gaze is in response to the male gaze, which is a feminist film theory from, I think, 1973, if I'm right. This feminist film theorist, Laura Mulvey, talked about how most films are designed for the male gaze. And if you've heard of Alison Bechdel's Bechdel test about scenes in film, that there are so few films that had a scene between two female identifying characters that didn't discuss a male character or male person. So for a long time, feminist film critics have been talking about how film has traditionally been designed for and scripted for the male gaze, particularly female identifying people and female characters and female bodies. So I've always been asking myself, like, what is the female gaze, and not always responding to, like, reframing, because as an actor, I have been so often auditioning for the male gaze, framed within a male gaze, been given scripts and characters that were written from a particular gaze that I was being kind of asked to. I can't tell you how many times in my 20s I got told that I should be less grounded. A note I kept getting, which I thought was ridiculous, that I was too grounded.
What does that mean?
Which, I mean, exactly. For most actors, you want to be more grounded, in your body, in yourself, rooted in who you are. But often when I was auditioning to play women in their 20s, I would get notes like, I think she's a little bit flightier, or she's just, she's less grounded, and she's like, doesn't know who she is. And it's coming off like you're too grounded in yourself. And that always annoyed me, because I was like, well, I'm a woman in my 20s, and I'm grounded. Like, I think she could be saying these lines from that experience and with that sense of herself. I don't think it's impossible. Luckily, now that I'm in my mid 30s, and also the pandemic happened, a lot has changed about the world, even in terms of how we're scripting things, how we're seeing character, who is writing things. There's so much better content being scripted now, and most of my auditions and scenes are just way better written, and they're also being written for a woman in her mid 30s. So I'm playing lawyers and bosses and more power women versus ingenues. But the female gaze came out of me asking myself not to be performing to someone else's gaze, but exploring what my own gaze was, and performing from a place, writing and playing with the audience from a space of my own gaze, which is a queer woman's gaze. I use the term woman. I identify as a woman. I identify as female. I also identify as gender fluid. I use she and they pronouns, and I'm kind of gender flexible and gender experimental. And in my queerness, I mean, I identify as a lesbian, but I've dated non-binary people and trans women and trans men. And so I'm flexible and curious regarding all of that. But I also am really attached to my femininity and find power in femininity, as well as power in non-binariness or gender fluidity, or being gender free, I guess. So I've been asking myself to kind of dig into my own gaze, and almost feel like I'm flipping the gaze on the audience sometimes. I really like to be playful in that, and feel like we're having a conversation. And there's a lot of coded language that I think is, even the name gaze spelled with a Y in it. I feel like queerness is very playful in terms of knowing what the codes are, and then just effing around with the codes. I don't know if I can say effing. I just realized I probably said that already, but
yeah, you can say it's an all language show. Feel free.
Okay, great. I like to say gender fucking and fuck. I like the word fucking a lot as like a political term, fucking with the patriarchy and capitalism and the male gaze. So yeah, that's what I'm challenging myself to do in my own work.
What is it? Ride, Sally, ride. This is one of your singles, Ride, Sally, Ride. Talk to me about this song and what this song, where it stems from.
This song came out in 2022. I self-produced 5 singles in 2022. And then in 2023, I started working with a studio that I'm making my first full-length album with right now. And I released a song called Small Town Queer. And then I released another song myself. Ride, Sally, Ride, I released for Pride Month last year. And actually this past summer was the 40th anniversary of Sally Ride's trip to space. Sally Ride, many Americans, and I guess many people around the world know as America's first woman in space. She was the second ever woman in space after a Russian astronaut. And she went into space in 1983. And a lot of people don't know that she was also queer, that she was married to another male astronaut named Stephen Hawley when she went into space in 83. But within a couple years of her first trip to space, she divorced him and she got with her life partner, Tam O'Shaughnessy, who was actually, if you're queer and you want to watch a very tear-jerking video, watch Obama giving Tam Sally's Medal of Freedom. It's an emotional video for me. So she got with her life partner, Tam, a couple years after returning to space. So my song, Ride, Sally, Ride, is celebrating her as the first woman in space and that victory that we all know, the perspective she gained, kind of like how she negotiated that politically, very much being in a cis, white, male-dominated world at NASA. And then also it's me imagining her as a queer woman going to space, looking down at Earth and having this coming out moment with herself, or this moment of truth with herself about who she was and how she wanted to live her life, that shifted her perspective and allowed her to live in her queerness for the rest of her life. So that idea, when I saw those facts that she was married to a guy and then she went to space and then within a couple of years ended that relationship and got with her life partner who she was with for the rest of her life, who is a woman, I just thought it writes itself. It's like space must have changed her and made her see another side of herself and see herself in a different way and empower her to be more truthful when she went back down to Earth from that moment of truth in space. So that inspired the song.
9, 8, 7, 6. We go for main engine start. We have main engine start and ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of STS-7 and America's first woman astronaut. And the shuttle has cleared the tower.
She flew up, up, up in the galaxy. She went down, down, down in history. She was America's first space lady. Always one of the guys. She flew that rocket into the sky. She needed space, needed to get high, needed to see this place from another side. Ride, Sally, ride that rocket to the other side. We're looking up at you and you're burning bright, and the trail you blaze is a beacon light. Ride, Sally, ride, Sally, ride that rocket. You were born to fly. The ones who hold you down are getting smaller now. They might be Superman, but you are kryptonite.
And on that note, we'll return after this Rainbow Country update.
Hi, I'm Simone Denny, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
If you are in the Toronto area, Thursday, August 31st, the streaming service Mubi presents the Canadian premiere of the award-winning audacious queer dark comedy Rotting in the Sun. Check out the trailer.
If you're doomed to live in torment, nothing can keep you from it. That is your fate.
Ahora, si me permites, acabo de llegar de Cicatela. Yo creo que igual ni te hace falta.
Sí, Cicatela.
Sebastian, hi. Jordan Firstman. Like, I watched your movie last night. I watched Crystal Fairy and the Magic Cactus last night. Michael, Sarah, Gabby, Hoppin', like, I watched it.
Follow me on Instagram, right?
I don't even know you.
You're not funny.
Inspire impersonation.
Your are so wavy. You're the right person to work on the show with me. Think of it like Curb Your Enthusiasm, but positive.
Señora, I'm looking for mi amigo, Sebastian.
Que no sé.
Where the fuck is this bitch? I just found his phone.
Oh my god, weird.
Tell me where Sebastian is. I know you know where he is.
Dime dónde está Sebastián, sé que sabes dónde está.
Sebastian, if you're watching, come the fuck home.
Haz lo tuyo mejor. Eso. Yo lo único que quiero es que todo esto se resuelva así.
Why are you like me? Tell Sebastian that I am his worst nightmare and that nobody ghosts Jordan Firstman.
Mubi presents the Canadian premiere of the award-winning dark queer comedy Rotting in the Sun, followed by a virtual Q&A with the film's director, Sebastian Silva. This is happening Thursday, August 31st at Toronto's Paradise Theatre. For more information, check out the website paradiseonblore.com/calendar and look for Rotting in the Sun.
Hi, my name is Joanne Vanicola, and I'm an actor and a writer, and I was first on Rainbow Country with Mark Tara on discussing the massacre at Pulse Club in Orlando. I realized how important it was for our community to have a radio station, specifically for our issues, to talk about people in the LGBTQ community and to provide an outlet for our stories, to discuss our politics, culture, and give voice to the issues that matter to us, and of course our artists and the things that we do globally, and talk about culture. And without people like Mark Tara providing a space for this with a radio show like this, then we wouldn't have that voice. So support, tune in. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paul Poirier, Canadian champion in ice dance and 3-time Olympian, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
So Holly Cinnamon, we're talking about you, we're talking about your music. Let's talk about your acting. You've been on shows like Marvel's Daredevil. You were mentioning earlier about being on the movie Hocus Pocus 2, as well as HBO's Succession. You were a stand-in, I understand, for the actress Sarah Snook, who played Shiv Roy on Succession, and you were also featured as an actor in the episode that was Living Plus on season 4, where you played the character of Lana. First of all, how many seasons of Succession? Because that is and was a really popular show, a huge show on HBO. and you were on that show. How many seasons were you on that show?
Well, I worked on it as a stand-in for 2 seasons. I started during the pandemic in the fall of 2020, on season 3. That's when they started shooting season 3. And at that point, I had returned to Canada for the first 7 or 8 months of the pandemic. And then I went back to New York, and things were starting to happen a little bit in the film and TV industry, but it was picking up very slowly. So there wasn't a lot of work in Canada or in the US at that time in the fall of 2020. This is pre-vaccines. And I had a friend who was the stand-in for Logan Roy, the father. And so we had met on another set, and he had said I was a perfect match for Sarah. So I reached out to him, and they were going to start shooting a new season. So I had this goal to become her stand-in for the new season because, first of all, I wanted just a steady job, a place to go that was consistent, a form of income to help recover from the pandemic, and also just a kind of a purpose, because I think for a lot of us whose industries were shut down for a while, I mean, I did a lot of work online, but it's different when you go into work and you have the same people you say hi to every day. So I pursued that casting director that cast the stand-ins for that show pretty hard and was pretty relentless, and eventually got in and got a couple days on set. And I kind of had a feeling like they were going to make it a permanent full-time thing, because of pandemic restrictions, meaning actors couldn't jump from one set to the other. They would hire you full time to just be on a show so that you weren't going around from one show to another in order to stop the spread of COVID if it were to arise in any particular production. So we were put on a weekly contract and hired for 5 months in early 2021. And that was a very special bonding experience of that whole team, the cast and the crew, because we were shooting it during the pandemic, and we were one of the first of like a handful of shows in New York that were back shooting that early.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about season 4 of Succession, and let's nerd out and talk spoilers.
Yeah, let's do it. I can
for a hot
The exciting
minute.
thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm very excited by this. Because this is the first time I can really say anything because the show is over. I did a lot of interviews in March about this show, but I couldn't say a lot because the whole season hadn't aired. So you're my first interview since the whole, Succession's done. It's all out there. So ask away. I'll tell you anything.
Okay. So first of all, what are your thoughts on how things played out in season 4, especially with the Logan Roy character sort of dying mid-season? And to be honest, when I was there's 2 things I don't like about Succession. One of them is the quick zooms that they do, like zooming in and zooming out on characters. I'm not a big fan of that. And that's pretty much it, really. But when that episode where he dies on the plane, it was almost as if the actor, like something happened to him and they couldn't film him, because you rarely saw the actor that played Logan Roy when that episode aired. But for yourself, the season as a whole, what are your thoughts on season 4? Because it's the series is done.
Yeah.
There are no more seasons.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I mean, first of all, my main overarching thought is that it's sad for everyone who worked on the show that it's over. I think it was the right call artistically to end it before it overstayed its welcome and to cut it off short. That feels like it fits in the style of the show. But that crew and cast were like my family because of the pandemic circumstance and just how close we all got and how successful that show was and how top of their game everyone in the room was, but also so generous and present, and it didn't feel super hierarchical. I mean, I know these directors that are nominated for Emmys now, like I have their phone numbers. It was just such a great community and workplace that's that's the main feeling of it being over for me, is sad that I don't have that job to go back to, because I would love to go shoot season 5 with them, just to be back in the room with those people. But in terms of Logan's death, I mean, I'm first off impressed that the secret stayed a secret, because we shot that, as you said, that was episode 3 of a 10 episode arc. And they did shoot his stuff, Brian Cox's scenes, out of order. They shot the scene with him and his security guy. They shot that even though I think it's in episode 1 or 2, they shot that at the very end of the season, just to try to throw off any press or anyone that was kind of watching the set. They would shoot his stuff sporadically throughout the season, just so that people wouldn't catch on that he wasn't shooting anymore. But yeah, I mean, Brian Cox has said in some interviews that he wasn't a big fan of his death being that early on at the time when it happened. So I think there was some avoidance of him coming to set and wanting to shoot those scenes, because he was not a huge fan of, or wasn't maybe ready to let it go, or wanting to shoot the scenes of his own death. There's a great photo double that they have for Brian, who I've worked with before a few times as the Shiv photo double, who's such a good match, who they had on a lot of those tarmac scenes. There's so many tarmac scenes in season 4. If you watch it, I think every single episode they're on a tarmac at some point. Like the theme of season 3 was
they
hotels.
got the money, girl.
Yeah, season 3 we shot, maybe because of the pandemic, I don't know, we shot in like 7 different hotels in season 3. In season 4 we shot mostly on the same couple tarmacs, and almost every single episode there'll be a tarmac. So that's an interesting recurring visual theme. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, I think the ending of the show is appropriate to the show. It's
sort of
bittersweet. It's vague and it's bittersweet. It's kind of murky and icky and doesn't really leave you with a winner or satisfied, or like none of the siblings win, which I think is basically accurate to the state of America and Wall Street and capitalism and the rat race that the show is really about. You know, no one really wins if you're all just vying for power that basically is an illusion in a way. I mean, that's my take on it. Values wise, none of us can avoid death. None of us you can't buy your way into eternal life or happiness. You know what I mean? So it's all an illusion of hierarchy and power. And the moment a character thinks that they have that power and that they're on top, they've lost sight of what's actually going on, because something else is going on under the surface or behind their back that they've lost sight of. So I think that ending it in that gray area is really appropriate.
Did anything
I will
surprise
always be
you?
Team Shiv.
Yeah, me too. Me too. But did anything surprise you in regards to what happened in season 4?
Yeah, I would say the biggest surprise, and one of my favorite things about season 4 is like how much conflict comes to the surface in season 4. I feel like finally, especially between Shiv and Tom, I feel like finally some of the laundry, like the dirty laundry, was aired, as they say. I don't know if that's what they say, but it like came to light. You know, so much of the show is just things seething under the surface, and you know, the siblings like nitpicking each other and back talking each other, but rarely just full on fighting and saying everything directly to each other's faces. And for Shiv in particular, in season 4, there was like the lid, I'm using so many mixed metaphors, but like the lid on the boiler was like lifted off, and we got to see some of that water boil over, or like smoke kind of release. And that was very satisfying for me. That Shiv Tom scene on the balcony in episode, is it 5? I think it's episode 5. My favorite thing about that scene, which you don't really see a lot of it in the cut, but because I was there, you know, shooting it, standing in, was that they had all the background turn that were in their apartment and watched them through the glass.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some really cool shots. I think you only see glimpses of these shots where they cut to a wide shot and you see Tom and Shiv on the balcony and you can see into the room and see everyone in the room frozen, staring and watching them. They actually, I think, ended up wanting to keep it very tight on the two of them for the fight. But there were some interesting things they shot where they would like go into the apartment and it was dead silent and you would watch them fight through the glass as though you were at the party seeing this play out. And I kind of love that they cut that angle, but I think they wanted to keep us close in the fight as the viewer, so that we felt like we were right in the thick of them instead of giving that perspective, which might have even made it comedic. I wonder if they looked at that footage and it felt comedic to like pull back and see everyone watching them through the glass. But to me, actually, it was very sad, like to see these characters that, I don't know, I guess I have a lot of empathy for them because I'm intimate with the actor. You know, I see them on set. I feel a different intimacy with the characters. Like I can't judge them in the same way that I think if you're just watching someone on TV and they're a character, you can maybe judge them. But if you work with them every day and you see them behind the scenes and, you know, they're your family, it's just way more complex. So I thought it was a very sad scene, and very sad to almost like pull back through the apartment and see all these people watching them.
I will say this. I always thought the relationship and the dynamic, and there was almost like an undercurrent of I think of attraction or some sort of like I don't know, between Tom and cousin Greg.
I knew you were gonna say that. Yes.
And I'm like, is he more so like Tom coming on to cousin Greg? Like I'm like, is he coming on to him? Like, I kind of think so. But it's like they never went anywhere with that. And I thought that would have been very interesting.
There's actually a hilarious Taylor Swift like fan edit. It's like I actually posted it because of how good it is on my Instagram. If you want to check it out, go to holly.cinnamon and look at my reels and you'll see this edit. It's a Tom and Greg edit to that Taylor Swift song. It's like, you wear short skirts, I'm on the bleachers. I don't know the song, but it's basically like comparing Shiv and Greg, and that Tom actually belongs with Greg and not with Shiv to this Taylor Swift song.
What's your take?
I think it's a very nuanced, successful portrayal of like somewhat homophobic, like bro culture. That's like, I don't know. Tom makes me so uncomfortable. Like that, like, I don't know. Yeah, the character, not the actor. The actor is lovely. I was actually worried when I was going to work with him that I was going to be too uncomfortable around him because he's so good at playing Tom. He, in real life, Matthew McFadden is like, he also played Mr. Darcy in the new Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley. And he's way more Mr. Darcy in real life than he is Tom, which is also why it's so fun to watch him, because he goes from this like British, austere, Darcy-like fellow to playing this very creepy, weird guy on the show. And then he'll just snap back out of character and be so lovely. But I think, I mean, it plays with that that tension between them in a way. You could call it queer baiting. I don't know. It's complex. I think Tom is just really sexually very messed up. And I think it's a like great portrayal of like Tom's desire for some kind of toxic masculinity where he's like oppressing this. I mean, like, this guy who's essentially his employee. So that's sexual harassment, basically. But he is having fun by like teasing this kind of bro macho kind of sexual harassment. Like, you know, he's always like Greg, I'm gonna fuck you up, and then he's like, I'm just kidding, I'm kidding, right? Or like, do you want to go do this? But like, if you said yes, then that would be gross because you would be, ew, you want that, Greg? That's disgusting. But also, Greg constantly doesn't know whether he's joking or not. So it's like a form of gaslighting, a form of bullying.
Very passive aggressive.
Yeah, and the fact that Tom is like needs to do it of desperation, and I think like powerlessness and like a desperate clinging to like some performed masculinity. Like it feels Matthew is so brilliant, I think, in that role at capturing like performative masculinity in the whole Greg dynamic and in like all the like with Logan. I don't know. I mean, I think it kind of feels right that Tom wins in the end because it's like so sick that he is clearly a facade, like clearly just performing bullshit constantly to everyone, trying to be some image that he thinks, which is also sad. Like Tom is in a way the show's underdog, just like Greg, which is why he's oppressing Greg, like constantly belittling and kicking Greg around because Tom is also, Tom Wamsgams, I can't remember where he's from, but somewhere in middle America, where he's not a born and bred New Yorker. He's not an Ivy League educated. He's just some guy. He's an imposter and he knows it and we know it. And he is just desperately trying to pretend he's not in a very see-through way. And that, to me, the fact that he ends up taking over the company and becoming the puppet of Madsen just captures America in a way that I think no other ending would.
So we're talking about you acting on one of the most popular TV shows around, Succession, but something else too that's happening in the acting world is, and has been for the last few years, is essentially who should be telling whose story. Should queer people be telling queer stories? Should trans people be telling trans stories? Should maybe straight people be telling straight stories? What's your take on, and as a general question, what's your take on essentially who should be telling whose story? Let's start there.
Yeah. Well,
I know it's a big question, but just generally.
It's a big question. I'll answer that by just talking specifically about 3 examples in my life. One is that I recently, I guess, talked myself out of being in a movie by someone who I thought was queer, who offered me a role as a queer, like lesbian villain in a movie where the 3 main characters were lesbians, and I was the ex-girlfriend of one of the other 2. And so we had some initial, I read the script, we'd talked about it, and then we had an initial kind of sit down and over Zoom, like a conference call. And my question was like it was a historical piece, and the time of like when it was set wasn't really clear. It was kind of like in an abstract place, but it wasn't the future. It wasn't an idealized society. It was kind of like a gangster, film noir, dark kind of show. Anyway, I was asking the person who wrote it and created it, how does this character's queerness affect like how she relates to these mafia guys that she's bossing around? And how does it, when she's like tying up her ex-girlfriend and threatening her, but they live in this world that historically like being queer would be a risk to even be exposed. Like, how does that dynamic work with the world that they live in? And he was basically like, oh, I don't really think that like the queerness of the characters has any impact on the plot. And like, I wouldn't really see it that way. Like he said to me, like, I grew up with like queer family members and like, it was just normalized in my childhood. So like, I don't really think that queerness really, like, basically kind of said, I don't see queerness. Like queerness is like, it's like saying I'm colorblind. He was like, I'm queer blind and it doesn't impact the story at all. And I don't think it would be any different if they were all straight. And I was like, okay, to me, that was like writing a movie about whales and then setting it on land. And then when you cast a whale and they were like, so what is like, have you considered like what it feels like to swim in the ocean? Basically saying like, oh no, I think whales can exist in any environment and it doesn't impact them. And I have no interest in researching whales whatsoever. I didn't research whales and not interested in whale culture. And I just wrote this play about whales, but it's actually not about whales at all. So anyway, that's not going to work out. So there are circumstances where I think it's unfortunate that someone would want to write a piece and center the experience of 3 queer femme women as the 3 main characters and then not be interested in a queer femme woman's experience of being a queer femme woman whatsoever. So that is what I'm against. For myself, like I'm writing a piece about a cis white woman in her 50s right now. I am a cis white woman in my mid 30s. And it's important for me to like hire people that are of the generation of the character. This character has a trans kid and I am not a trans person. I have dated trans people and I have a lot of trans friends. And to me, it's about, as the writer, knowing how much I can write that experience and knowing how much I can't and knowing who I should pay to advise me. And I hired a couple of my trans and non-binary friends to read it. I just paid them to read it and give me notes. And to me, that's an ethical approach to writing characters. It doesn't mean like I could never write a person of color because I'm white, but I also got a script and I thought that there was some problematic language around Asian representation in it. And so before I agreed to do this pilot, I hired one of my Asian American friends for an hour on Zoom to like read and discuss the script with me so that I could then talk to the casting director and the writer about it and say, well, this is the conversation I had with my friend and this is where this is coming from, and just be informed by her experience.
How did that go over?
We ended up changing some language. There's some things I didn't say that were scripted for me that I said, I don't think this is, or can we cut this down and can we say this part? Like there were some things in it that I'm not going to say on here, but things that were like, it was basically making fun of, the goal was to make fun of white women tourists that would go and study yoga and like approach Orientalism, like approach these Eastern healing cultures from a place of extreme like white privilege and Orientalism. So the goal was to punch up, so to speak, but the script wasn't always achieving that. So there was some language that it just felt really off to me and felt like we were repeating the problems of Orientalism that the script was trying to make fun of. So yeah, there was some, and then there's some boundaries around, I'm like, okay, am I going to share this? Am I going to post this? Am I going to say this line? How do I use my power in this scene to advocate for what I think is right? Some projects you just don't take because their values are too misaligned. And other projects you take because you think if somebody else was going to be here, they might not ask those questions or request those changes. And I actually have power here by being the person in the room and saying yes to the job and engaging in that complex and challenging the writer director and saying, actually, like I have the power as an actor to set a boundary and say, okay, well, I don't feel comfortable with that line. And, it's a career risk. Sometimes you don't want to always walk into every set. Like there are things I say no to because I'm like, it's going to be every line. I'll tell my agents, like, I'm not going to go into this workshop because I literally think they need to rewrite the entire song that I'm in because it offends me. So that's not going to be a productive conversation. But if it's a script and I think that the intentions of the writer are, good and that they might be receptive to having those conversations on set, and it's like 3 or 4 lines in an entire script that I think maybe we should adapt, then I'm willing to step into that conversation and be the person in the space and if they get pissed off and they don't want to work with me again because I set boundaries that I thought were ethical and taking care of protecting everyone's like rights and dignity and being respectful of the people that we're representing and talking about in our work, then, it's not really a huge loss for me to not work with that particular person again, I guess.
Well said. You have a song called Small Town Queer. What's this track about? Small Town Queer.
It's about my experience growing up queer in rural Alberta, just outside of Edmonton. I grew up in a town called Fort Saskatchewan. I went to school in Ardrossan, where there's more people in my high school than in the town. And it's about representing queer people from rural parts of Canada and North America that aren't always represented, and living in that in-between space where you do belong as the person who works at Wendy's and goes to the Value Village or the Goodwill and goes to church, but you also don't belong because there's not necessarily queer spaces, or there weren't for me in the early 2000s when I was a teen on the prairies there.
Well said. Holly Cinnamon, thank you for your time. Well said, well done, well filmed, well recorded. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Friday night in who knows where, sky as far as you can see. Everyone knows everyone, but there's no one who knows me. I'm just that girl from school, that girl from church, that Wendy's employee. 'Cause being queer out here feels like a lonely tumbleweed. Oh, I'm a small town queer, and I'm way out here. Can I go to New York City where the living's so pretty? Gotta save up for a year. So I'm a small town queer, and I'm stuck out here. No one knows the real me, but I can feel me bursting at the seams of a Goodwill jeans. Friday night, no place to go, not a queer club in this town. I wanna get my groove on, but there's nowhere to get down. Steal my daddy's pickup truck, drive around and pick up chicks. Steal my brother's cowboy boots so that I can get my kicks. 'Cause I'm a small town queer, and I'm way out here. Gonna go get seen like Ellen, but for now I'm chilling, herding cows and sipping beer. Oh, I'm a small town queer, and I'm stuck out here. Praise the Lord for eBay so I can get gay. Secret magazines by the Brooklyn Queens. I wanna raise my rainbow flag above my head. But if I
You can find Holly Cinnamon's music on your favorite streaming service. And for even more on this queer, gender-fluid actor and musician of stage and screen, simply visit hollycinnamon.com.
Bill 7, to ban discrimination in employment, government services, and housing, based on a person's sexual orientation, was up for a vote at Queen's Park. Most NDP and Liberal MPPs supported the bill, but without some progressive Conservative legislators backing, a divisive split could rack the province. 4 PCs decided to break party ranks to vote with their conscience and support Bill 7. Cabinet Minister and MPP Dennis Timbrell did it to show solidarity for his beloved brother, the well-known drag queen Rusty Ryan. And for me, a gay politician who was not yet out, I had to take a stand. We were known as the Gang of Four. I'm former Cabinet Minister and MPP Phil Gillies. The date, December 2nd, 1986, when LGBT rights came to Ontario.
Phone rings. I got a message from the mayor. He's going to call me back the next day. I get the call, and he said, if you'd accept, we'd like to honor you with the key to the city. There was an event later that year in May. Just a key, right? Like, key to what? A decent job, a good singing career. It's really a metaphor, but it's history. So a reporter wants to talk to me and says, so it's a key, right? Like, what's the big deal? I said, well, not everybody gets the key. So I looked it up, and I guess it is kind of a big deal.
The date, May 17th, 2018, when trans activist Susan Gapka made history by becoming the first trans woman to be presented with the key to the city of Toronto. By the way, past recipients include Rush and the Raptors. And just like that, this little gay journey through Rainbow Country has come to an end. For the full 2-hour episode, simply head over to marktara.com where everything is connected and hit the archives banner. To keep up to date with the show, check out the socials at Mark Tara. The edited podcast version of Rainbow Country is available on all major platforms. Finally, I want to take this time to thank you for taking your time to be with me. Remember, despite all the craziness in the world these days, know this, that we are living in days of making dreams come true, so believe in yourself. And the world will believe in you.
Hi, this is Police Constable Danielle Botno, also known as LGBT Cop, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.